What's good? What's up, everybody? This your boy King Darius with No Approval Podcast with the ninth episode. 2020 is here now, so I want to say Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the new year, so just sit back, enjoy, relax. It's gonna be a serious topic. Episode 9 is entitled "Reversing Gentrification." And I do have a special guest here with us. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure, man. First and foremost, my name is John Jordan Jr. And I'm your cousin, man. And I actually run a social innovation firm called Remix the Soul of Innovation. And we built our own company to actually figure out how do we actually address gentrification inside of black communities in urban and in rural communities that are affected by gentrification.
Okay. All right. So we're going to get into it. There's so many changes that's coming up in 2020, and we can just think about the map of what is really gentrification. People know as far as, oh yeah, I see others moving into my neighborhoods, but do they really know what that means? Can you enlighten them on what that means?
Yeah, man. I mean, did you all see the Eddie Murphy?
Yeah.
All right. So he actually had a whole segment on this, on the Mr. Rogers segment, which is this idea of when typically, I'll say it, white people move into a neighborhood that has historically been black or brown, and then they raise up the pricing values, and then the people who are low income or less fortunate have to move out of their neighborhoods because they can no longer afford to stay there.
Right.
And that's just the trend, is they move into a neighborhood, the housing prices and the cost of living goes up, and the people who originally call that neighborhood home have to leave. That is gentrification.
And how many people are homeless because of that?
The homeless population is growing. And you're seeing it inside of cities like that is, I'll say, the fastest growing cities of gentrification are San Francisco and Oakland, and then you also have New York.
Right. The
housing population in these areas has grown and at staggering rates. We're also seeing it down in Atlanta, which is where I live now. The homeless encampments that are actually building up, and the problem is that it's actually pushing full families out. And you have a lot of kids, homeless kids, and mothers and children that are actually developing their little communities or trying to figure out ways to survive and turn all kind of lifestyles because of it.
And you also actually see that in Charlotte too as well, being a native from Charlotte, born and raised, born and bred. Living on Beatties Ford, I'm seeing, houses getting burned down, turned down, or whatever you want to do, knocked down in any such way, and be built to these beautiful homes. And you like, man, I know nobody in this neighborhood could actually afford to stay there.
Right.
And then I'm turning my head and I see a whole white family or Caucasian family, moving to my neighborhood and don't even know the history of my neighborhood. So I also think too, with gentrification, you moving into these black neighborhoods, are you prepared for those violence in those neighborhoods?
You said prepare for the what?
The violence in the neighborhood,
think about it, right? So the violence is typically a byproduct of a concentration of poverty.
Right.
It actually is more of an economic reality. Of course, violence is a localized thing. You end up getting into beef, whatever, or issues with people that you know and that you're close to. So people talk about black on black violence. That's because black people typically live together.
Right.
Right. White people do the same thing.
They got white on white violence too, but
right. The issue though with gentrification is it's different types of people mixing, and in them mixing, they don't actually acknowledge the other type of people who were there before. They actually come with this sense of, well, this is my neighborhood now, or I'm moving in here and I have all of the rights of what it means to be here. That's the problem, is that there's no sense of belonging to a neighborhood, and then the identities of the neighborhood and the people who are there change, right? At the core of what gentrification is, simply put, is economic racism. It's a byproduct of racism that plays out in the economy.
And I don't think a lot of our audience out there, I don't think they ever thought that way, that it is economic racism. Because at the end of the day, your dollar's green. That's the only universal thing around here.
And that's I'll say it this way, is that's one of the things that makes it so complex, right? Because our entire economy and even us all go after money.
Right.
It's what literally makes our world and our economy work. and we're now connected more than ever. But our neighborhoods and the places that we live also have a certain meaning to us.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But if you're no longer able to define that meaning and somebody else comes in and then they're going to say what your neighborhood and you know these places and the people here and they're going to claim it as if it's yours, now it comes into a question of who actually belongs here. Do you belong here because you just moved here and you can afford to live here? Or do you actually have to become an actual resident and get to know the people here, and that's what makes you a part of it?
And I feel that you have to get to know the people. If you're in the neighborhood, love thy neighbor. And that right there in itself, love thy neighbor, is getting eliminated. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know my neighbor. My neighbor doesn't look like me. My neighbor hasn't even came to say hi to me. They're sitting up here moving. And you have to really sit down and think about the people that's been there for years, the tradition. I know as far as in the neighborhood that my uncle lives in, every year we have a cookout, 4th of July cookout. And then we block off the whole session, the block parties and everything like that. But gentrification comes about. We're not seeing that anymore. That heart of the neighborhood is gone.
Absolutely, right? And that's what makes the neighborhood special, is what you actually do that's unique there and the relationships you got. And that's the problem, right? And typically, and this is a cultural difference. Like it is, and I want to be very clear here to say this. White people is not the problem.
It's not.
Whiteness is a problem.
Whiteness
is a mentality,
mm-hmm.
and it is a way of moving.
Right.
Right? And it operates in a way that whatever is there before it doesn't really matter, and whatever I define it as is what it's going to be. That's whiteness. Mm-hmm. And black people even have a mentality of whiteness. You can have black gentrifiers. Be very clear. Just because it's white people moving in or black people moving into a neighborhood, it can still be gentrification.
Right.
It actually has to do with the economic reality. Are the people that are there, do they have access to being able to develop their neighborhood? Most people who live in a neighborhood have an idea of what's possible there, but they can never get the money. They can never get the access to the credit, and they certainly won't be in a position to actually develop and build a shopping mall of their neighborhood.
And one thing I want to add to what you said is, they won't even get support.
Exactly.
Because as a black community, we have so many ideas to change our community to make it better, but where the support is behind it.
And our support is I'll say, like, our ideas, we don't own them, right? And that becomes the key thing about gentrification is the actual ownership structures or the pathways to ownership in. So let's actually get into what that is, because I don't buy into, as a black entrepreneur, I've also built like a retail business or product business down in Atlanta. And whether it's the hood, and we built it down in Miami, and we've been in the poorest parts of Miami. Black people came out for us, and they actually supported our business, even in more areas than white people, who we would take our faces off of this, put our business in front of white people with other white people working our company, and that's called agency,
right? That
they would buy from their own before they would ever buy it out of my hands, and that then they still didn't even support just in tips. When black people saw what we were doing, they actually paid extra. They would tip us as much as our drink would cost. Even if they could only buy $1 ices, they're going to give you $1 in tip because they appreciate you as an entrepreneur offering what people say is not possible. So we do support our own, and I use this as like Carol's daughter. What we don't have is the actual systems to keep ownership of the things that we build. So like Carol's daughter was this black-owned hair company. She sold her company, made all this money, but it had to be bought by a white company. Why? Because they were the only ones with enough money to actually buy this. But the black people and black women made the company successful. So part of ownership and even keeping ownership is having the economic systems of like that the white people have. And I'll actually explain what they are, right? So, and typically in gentrification, I'll say, where does it start? Where does it all start?
I would say with the money.
Right? And where does money start for you?
Money starts either could be
when you really want to start getting money. What is the first thing you do?
Get a job.
All right, right. You go figure out. And a hustle is just an informal job,
right?
If we're gonna call it what it is, you're doing activity to get money.
Yeah, typically, but a hustle could be anything, selling bracelets,
It don't matter.
T-shirts, or whatever.
It don't matter. You going to work in the economy. You going to figure out a way of buying and selling or trading, and typically a job is trading your labor for money.
For money.
Right, and you get as much as you can, right? You get a high-paying job, all right, it's $10, $15 an hour in some places now. That's what they're fighting for. Fight for 15, I support that. And it's this idea of, you trading your time for labor, you then start saving that money, and then you get access to it. You start getting credit, right? All of these things become tools that actually allow you as a citizen to begin and to participate in the economy.
Right.
First, it starts with a job. What's the issue with African Americans? Is that typically we have a higher unemployment rate that's double that of whites.
We do.
The other element of that is that white people typically own the business, and whoever owns the business, it doesn't matter the race, you hire people that look like you.
Exactly.
Anyone that's in control of hiring typically hires people like them, right? And that's just a natural thing.
It is.
So if we don't have access to businesses or the jobs, and that then starts, you're not, most people, I'll say middle class people, are getting well paid jobs.
Pretty decent jobs. You're right.
And most of the people who actually are buying these houses don't own companies. They just have a good job.
Exactly.
All right. So they have a good job, and then what that does is allow them to get credit. Because you have enough money to pay your bills.
And the credit thing is such an importance that we critically do miss as black people. We feel like that we gotta have cash for everything.
Well, it's, what cash comes in with trust.
Exactly. It
comes in with trust. It's literally so, right? And on the dollar, on the cash, it says, "In God we trust," and we know money ain't about trusting God. It's actually in this idea of trust funds. Trust is about an exchange. I believe that this thing is valuable, and then I'll go ahead and give you this for that value.
Exactly.
That's why it's currency. And what you're trading is your time for money. Like, it comes down to, if you look at the root word of currency, it's time, it's current. How much money,
do
energy
you currently
exchange over it.
Have?
Right. And so as you learning how to work with money is financial education. And you typically learn that through people who, your relationships, your actual own self-knowledge that you've gone out and studied. But even what you study, you don't really know until you know someone who's doing it.
Exactly.
And they can then lend their time. You can get them to lend their time to teach you. Or you've actually gone out and trial and error. You hustle, you see that didn't work, spent this money up, I thought that would work and it didn't. So you start learning over time by your trial and error.
So trial and error is a key element for me, because me trying to find my niche or my hustle or what I like to do, it really took trial and error. And I feel like, as with the black community, we're scared to do that trial and error, just a little bit. But I'm also seeing now, as far as times changing, us stepping out of that forefront and being brave to fail and get up and try again, because you don't know until you fail. And then if you fail, why are you taking it as a fail instead of a lesson learned to make you better for the next thing that's actually meant for you?
And I think that's the key thing I want you to take away from it, right? Is that even in the trying, if you try shit and it works for you, then you've learned, you've progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the key thing is. In that effort, there's progression. As long as you focus on the progression and keep that in mind, even if you get back to zero and then at least you got your knowledge and your know-how, you still progressed. It may not feel that way. It can send you into all kind of depressed states, but you still got to change your perspective and know you know more than you did the day before. The difference is that a lot of relationships and families that have access to knowledge, they can teach you these things so that you don't have to learn by failure. There's two ways to learn. You can learn by insight, which is somebody telling you, or you can learn through experience.
And
experience costs more,
it
and
hurts.
it takes a lot of time, and it hurts.
It hurts.
Right? And so, but black people have been learning through experience. We have to accept fundamentally our talent built America into the number one economically viable country. We've just never owned it. Right? The government owns it. Your employer owns it. Mm-hmm. And there is a whole different depth of learning how to own your own risk that you take as a business or an entrepreneur. You get to share in that reward. But we've been learning under someone else's dime because we can't afford the time to learn on our own. Or if we are learning, we're typically learning how to do something in somebody's company. And then if you can link up with somebody, you can actually then share your learning in their company or share with them, right? Like, but it's all about the progress and us then as we progress, sharing what we know with other black people. That's the key.
And you're right. That's the key of actually sharing that knowledge, instead of holding that within or not reaching out to somebody, or you seeing the opportunity to be able to teach, step up and teach, or step up to enlighten that young person that may need that guidance for that time.
Because I will say this, I think we are now, and this is our generation's lesson, is that we're going to have to shine not in showing wealth or in showing off, right, but we're going to have to shine in influence.
Right.
Right? Like one of my favorite, most influential people say, Nipsey Hussle. He's one of my models. He said, inspiration is the call of God. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Like, to inspire is a spiritual thing. Right? And I know we're going to get back to the topic of development, but when we even talk about gentrification, I said it is a economic system, mm-hmm, of development,
right,
that is an entire system, and that's where the racism comes into play. Racism is a system of oppression. Right. If you don't have access to that system, that you're a bystander or you're impacted by that system, and you just got to go with whatever it says. Right? The number one issue that hurts my heart about gentrification is people know it's happening, and they feel like they can't do nothing about it.
So my question is to you. So you work in this field, you deal with gentrification, yeah, and you see people exiting out of their homes that they've been in for 30 years or just been passed down from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. What can we do as minorities to actually, I would say, stop it? Yeah. I mean, that's a big task for us to do, but
it's a big task. We can do it. It's going to take some organizing. It's going to take collective action. And we'll get to what those are, because I think people think that it's hard to organize black people.
It's not.
And it's really not. I think it's just a different way of looking at it. But before we even get there, the number one thing and reason why I do this is that we got to understand how gentrification affects us. It's not just people moving their homes, right? It's understanding how does that actually impact people.
The emotion state, the mental state.
All of it. Like there's this woman in Jersey, mm-hmm, named, what's her name? She wrote this concept called root shock, and is a Mindy Fully Love. Okay. And she wrote a book called Root Shock. And what it is she's showing that when you get moved out of your home has your memories, it has your sense of identity, right? You got Charlotte tatted on your arm. It's a part of who you are. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm from Maryland, D.C. I will always be from Maryland, D.C. Mm-hmm. or the DMV, all right? But when you get moved out of your home by force, you actually then, all of those memories are gone. Your memories, the places that you knew are no longer existing. The
traditions that you used to do, the picture, like for us, we used to take pictures outside of my aunt's house, for Easter.
Right.
Let's say gentrification gets down there.
And you can't take those pictures no more. Now, all of a sudden, that stops. That tradition stops. Even the memories of those people who were there at each of those things, the ability to keep that is gone. And so her entire analogy is that when you move people out of their neighborhood, it's like taking a plant out of its root system and then planting it somewhere else. It goes into shock. Most plants, when you put them in another pot, they actually like wither and they almost look damn near dead, mm-hmm, until they get adjusted into their area again. Well, human beings, the same thing happens, right? Our sense of self, you can, mm-hmm, go into depression, and then you go, mm-hmm, into a survivor state.
Correct.
Which then also impacts your body and your health in ways that people don't even think about. It's not an accident that black people have heart disease and diabetes the way that we are. Heart disease has to do with hate. You feel hate, you take that negative energy in. And diabetes literally has to do with love.
Right.
Sugar craving is about a love desire. And of course, if we're in an environment that don't love us and, right, hates us, these are the two things we want. So it makes sense. You know what I mean? And she looks at it from a biological standpoint. In your neighborhood, your ecosystem is what actually makes you feel healthy.
It does.
And I want to go to this, and we can talk about development, because as most of what this all happens, and the reason why it all happens is in the name of developing neighborhoods, making them better.
New developments.
Right.
Every week is a new development somewhere.
And you were explaining in Charlotte. I want you to go into this because, like, I go to, like, I'm from Maryland, D.C. D.C. was Chocolate City.
Mm-hmm.
I said was very much was.
Like salt and pepper everywhere.
Bruh, I went home and this shit is first off, you heard the whole thing with Howard, right? You got white people walking on the yard and they got like dogs shitting literally shitting on the campus.
Word?
Yeah, yo, it was a big ass news story that hit social media about like a white people were walking their dogs on Howard's yard.
I think I heard that.
And they took a shit on the yard.
That's disrespectful.
And it was just like, and they just left it there. And that's where it's like the disrespect and cultures be a whole lot of different things. But in that neighborhood, you ain't never see white people. When I first saw it, gentrification happen, it was white women jogging in 14th and U area. And I was like,
and this is in Maryland? This is in Maryland? This
is in D.C. This is right near Howard. Like, Howard is in the city. And it was a black area town. It's called 14th and U. It's been black since the Harlem Renaissance, like since the 30s and 20s, when Duke Ellington and all of them was doing jazz clubs in the area. There were no white people in the area. It was literally Chocolate City for a reason. And now you literally have the only place that did not crash in the 2008 economy was D.C. It had a quick period, but then it recovered. And the reason is because government, all those people and the lawyers trying to influence government all moved there. So then the economy actually ain't going nowhere because the government wasn't going nowhere. So it held on the prices, and then it just skyrocketed the prices. And now all the black people who are from there can't live there no more. They all moved out to PG County, moved out to Moco, and just in Virginia, or they would go down south. All right, and you go to wherever your other people are that could take you in, and that's what happens. So we end up going back to, and we're going to notice this, there's a push of black people back to the South.
Right.
And I think we got to be smart about how we all return back to the South, because I do think that that's where some opportunity is. But as you see people come into the South, they come in with a whole different mentality that ruins what you know about the South. And Southern hospitality and all this is gone. And
what I would say, the first time and you're right about that. And the first time I would say when looking into like gentrification is back in 2013. I moved to New York to go to school, and Brooklyn had my nose wide open, and
that boy was happy when you first got there. I remember you called me like, bro, I'm in here.
Yeah, I was in
the track and the whole nine. I remember.
I miss New York. It's love up there. That's all I'm gonna say. But in 2013, we had a mom and pop shop right under our dorms. And by the end of 2013, they put up a Adidas store. And walking down downtown Brooklyn, you see all these expensive stores that I can't walk into because I don't have the money. And I'm going to be real with you. A lot of people were moving out. It was also a news report about someone staying in Harlem for 13 plus years because of gentrification and then the uprising of rent. They were staying by the subway, like outside. Yeah. So... And he was, like you said, it's an emotional attachment. He was actually like sad and crying because that's all he knows is Harlem. Mm-hmm. Like where else is he gonna go? Yeah. And he's stuck in his own area because that's, like he said, that's all he knows. Yeah. He don't want to go to Brooklyn. He don't know anything in Brooklyn. It's a whole life adjustment. If I'm moving there from 13 years ago, and you telling me I gotta move to Brooklyn, I don't know how to adjust to that. Even that's a forceful move. If I chose to move, that's a different type of adjustment. Right. I had to think about that. But if I'm forced to move, I'm going to be resistant. It's going to take me time to accept that because I'm thinking about I'm trying to get back home regardless.
Mm-hmm. And even what you call home is now a moving target. That's a moving target.
As the time progresses, things get a lot more scarier every year.
And honestly, I think that's the important thing of your podcast, right? Is that we get to at least now have a conversations. Is that we all seen, first off, and I take this from Tupac, we didn't cause these problems.
No,
we did inherit them.
We inherit so much as far as in the black community that is sad, and it shows how strong we are as a people, and we need to realize that we inherit bull crap from the whites. We inherit bullcrap from our own people. Mm-hmm. That's something that we need to stop doing, by the way, y'all. But we just take it and we roll with it. But I think it's time that we take it and stand up and be powerful for it. I feel like this is the time to where we need to say we need to stop, or we need to take charge, and not be afraid of taking charge.
So let me ask you this: you were talking about kind of Charlotte, right? And you were seeing that these buildings are going up,
right?
Do you feel that that's like good development? Because it was happening in neighborhoods that wouldn't get investment otherwise. How do you feel about how Charlotte is changing?
I can't keep up, and I'm 27. Right. I'm not old. I just can't keep up with all this shit. It's train station being built to be able to go from either Concord here and all the areas around Charlotte, and then we have tolls now. Like, why do we need tolls? You feel me?
So let me ask you this: as a brother that grew up from this, right? You born and bred here.
Born and bred.
So do you feel that you had access to figuring out, as Charlotte develops, how much of that is in your hands? How much of it do you actually control, or are you looking to control?
See, for one, if I'm looking to control it, the first thing I have to have is power, right? Yes. And the first thing that comes with power, or to access power, you gotta have money. I'm gonna say that again.
I'm gonna challenge you.
That's
economic power.
Economic power. Okay, let's use economic.
Let's be very clear. We gotta be sharp here.
Okay.
People. It matters. What we say matters. And I'm gonna give you an example of power. There is power in the fact that of what you just said about black people, right? Is the fact that we still here and that we made it here. There's an element of power there. The fact that our culture influences the world. There's power there. Mm-hmm. Right, but we also have been intentionally left out of these participating in the economy from an ownership standpoint. Mm-hmm. Now, so what you're talking about is economic power, and it do start with that.
And we do, and that's the one thing that we do need. But as far as with the city itself, do I like the adjustment? I haven't really digested that thus far, because I don't know how my city's going to react to when everything's done. We're still changing, so
yeah. And that's the thing I'm excited about Charlotte, right? Like, my dad from here, so I got roots here, but I can say, is looking at DC, it's a different city. The number one thing I hear in Atlanta is, as it's changing, is like, this ain't Atlanta no more. You know what I mean? And I saw this in San Francisco, like in the Bay Area, right? You have it's interesting because the same thing that's happening in America is going to happen across the world. The same thing that's happening with black people is going to happen with poor people across the world. Well, what were you about to say?
Okay, so my question is that, we naming all these places, so
yeah.
This is a world thing.
This is a world thing. This is a world thing. And if we got to figure out as black people in America, then the rest of the world will figure it out as well. If you can solve black people's problems, you can solve the world's problems.
Right.
I'm very clear on that.
But nobody want to solve our problems.
We got to solve our problems.
Exactly.
Right? If you go back to what I said, we built America. America influences the world.
Right.
We ain't been in control of America. But our influence in America, in all of what we've been through, it does influence the world. It built, like, and I can give you examples on and on. The reason why I will. Let me go ahead and give it. Our culture of hip-hop, right?
Right.
Hip-hop came out of the Bronx. I always use this question, and this is the number one question in my work, is if the Bronx kept control of all of the economic power that came from the creation of hip-hop, all the money and all the profit created from hip-hop, stayed connected to where it came from, what would the South Bronx look like today?
Ooh. It'll look...
You can't even imagine it, right? Like, black people would have done so much dope shit. Right. It would be unimaginable.
Right.
But we just saw our first billionaire in hip-hop. Who was the first one? Do you know?
I'm not going to guess because I want to get it wrong.
All right. So the first billionaire that actually came out of hip-hop is the bruh from Straight Outta Compton, Dre.
You know what? I was going to say.
Now, how did he do it?
Well,
he did it through ownership
Mm-hmm.
of the Beats headphones. It's no question that anybody being real with themselves realized that all he did was put that on all of the rappers that he knew, all of our black influence and cultural influence made that product so hot that Apple bought it.
So that's the development, right?
That's development. But
Right.
it's his ownership of the company is actually what then caused him to gain economic power. But the reason I'm bringing this up, let me tie it through. Is that
I have something
Apple
for you. Go ahead.
Apple is a company from Silicon Valley built by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' influence was the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Who influenced the Beatles? The dude who influenced the Beatles was Chuck Berry, a black dude who built rock and roll, and Elvis is called the king of rock and roll. Our culture defines what happens in the world, even in Silicon Valley, but we don't own it. So Silicon Valley has recently hit a problem. Their homelessness is out of control. It's become so expensive to live that even those companies like Apple is having trouble, and they're investing in affordable housing. They're investing billions of dollars in affordable housing because they can't bring people to come work for them because nobody wants to live and work in a place that's so damn expensive.
Because then I'm burning my whole paycheck to.
And that's in whiteness. Go back to what I said about whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to a point where it then consumes so much that there's nothing left to consume, and it's gotten so expensive that now it's a problem even for the companies that then cause the problem.
So they losing money.
It's cancerous. And now they're getting to a point of losing money, so everybody, all the companies are trying to figure out how do we get the cost of living down again.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't going to be able to get it down, not there. So what you're going to have to do is invest and grow companies like Beats. But it needs to be black people owning the companies. He only owned a small portion of it.
But my thing is this. So he put it on all the rappers that he knew or whatever the case may be. But how many people supported him and stayed supported with him? See, this is the thing with our black culture. We'll start businesses all day. Mm-hmm. But how many people stay down to stay supportive? You know, give back great feedback and criticism, not to knock you down, but to actually build you up. You know, how many people are going to show up to an event that you have to promote your business or whatever the case may be that you're doing, you know, and how many people are going to be committed or accountable for going to that? You know, we don't do that because we hate.
I bet you, I'm going to challenge you. I bet all of your podcast listeners will. They'll hold you down.
I don't know. I might have to do a little show somewhere or do a little event to see if they come out.
And you got to have fun with it, man. I always say this for every black entrepreneur right now. When we talk about ownership, you got to go watch this Dolomite Is My Name. His brother was
he was a visionary. I seen that.
Visionary came
that's,
from bro.
That's a good movie.
That's the story.
Exactly.
And that's what we got to do as a people. And what he did, he understood two things. I always say this. One, he believed in himself.
That's number one. Before we even get to this, you have to believe in yourself. No matter who tells you that you can't do it, who's not in your corner, use that energy. Like my song for the year is that Hustle Ambition by 50 Cent.
Yeah, straight up.
I need all that hate. Give me all that hate. Because all that hate, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with it. So, but there's number one thing, you have to believe in yourself first before you can do anything.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I'm gonna trade a little songs. I ain't taking no more hate. I'm good on the hate. But I'm gonna take Nipsey Hussle from the Marathon Love. I need that, number one.
Okay.
And he starts off intentionally. And then I don't give a fuck.
Okay.
You gotta stop giving a fuck what people think about us, what it looks like, and then even when it ain't going our way, it's going the way it needs to, as long as you still moving forward and progressing to what you meant to do.
And I'm going to piggyback off that because, you know, a lot of things that I've been trying to do, you know, behind scenes, not with just my podcast, but in my personal life myself, it has not been going my way. But what I've been doing is going with that wave and finding the positive in that road to make it go my way.
Exactly.
Regardless.
You've been writing your content for your podcast, even when you ain't know it.
I mean, my life is my podcast.
Exactly.
So whatever I speak is the truth, or it happened before. So, but
and that's what influences and inspires people is because they going through the same thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of development, we always say they've started gentrification in under the umbrella of developing neighborhoods,
Right.
and community development is what they call it,
Right.
right? And there's a difference between community development and economic development. It's like, no, you're building economic development,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not building community. You ain't building relationships of the people who were there before
Mm-hmm.
and the people who are going to move in.
What is one way that we can start building our community as a black people into our togetherness, because we used to be so tight,
Yeah.
like when it came to our community.
Yeah, we were forced to do it by conditions, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
white people wouldn't let us in their places, so we had to all be together, literally and figuratively. And so once we got access, and you had a black middle class, they thought that, what I call the illusion of inclusion, they thought they could be white. You know what I mean? But the way in which we start is we have to focus on collective ownership. First off, ownership, what is it? You have to own assets, things of value
Mm-hmm.
that actually are paying you and that will grow in value.
And this to let y'all know, he's not talking about that BMW, that Mercedes. You know, he's not talking about
Nah,
that.
you gotta know what's a real asset. You know what I mean? And I will say,
what is a real asset for people out there that don't know what an asset is?
man, an asset is actually ownership, where you can actually get a deed or some sort of title that actually says you own this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different forms of it, right? So it's things that you can own that pay you money or that can generate money for you that you can also own because of it. So that goes from real estate, which is an actual house or
Mm-hmm.
land.
Mm-hmm.
You got businesses, right? You can start a business and then give out ownership shares to your friends and your people, and they can own a part of your business,
That's
which
what
is
it
all
is.
stocks are.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually own debt, which is you're buying someone's debt, which is a bond,
Mm-hmm.
which is a business or something saying that it owes you and will pay you an annuity. You actually have, so it's all other forms of assets, or like commodities or other things like
Mhm.
that. But you want to own things of value. Gold is more valuable than U.S. dollars,
It is.
right? Because the world
It's
trades
scarce.
off of gold.
Right.
Gold is the world's money,
I know.
and a dollar is the U.S. currency. There's a difference. If the United States goes down, then gold is much more valuable, and so all of those things are assets, and our ownership of assets collectively. How are you putting your money together with your brothers, your cousins, your friends, your neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
in a way to actually own something together? And it's going to require you not going out as much, not spending as much money, but actually in paying that cost and that sacrifice,
Mhm.
so that everybody can eat. You know what I mean? Like, Nipsey also had a song called Rose Clique or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And he was talking about, he was like, I'm planting the seed that will one day grow into a tree that will feed my people. And it's about owning something that can then bear fruit that can feed your people together.
That's an analogy I always use, because if you want to do something, plant that seed. It takes time for a plant to grow, and that right there in
That's the
itself,
hardest
the time aspect, I'm gonna circle that. The time aspect is, people are not patient enough to see it grow.
Yeah.
So that means, like, if you're putting all your energy, if you're using your good energy to water into the plant,
Mm-hmm.
when you start becoming negative, that plant can't grow, because you're throwing shade.
Yep.
And that's what you really are. You're
Yep.
throwing shade to what you're trying to do. If you're gonna be negative and throw shade, then why start growing a plant in the first place?
Nah, man, you said it. Like, patience in time is learning to work with time, and patience is the will to wait. And will, I mean that like willpower. You have to will yourself to wait and to give it the proper time. That's actually hard, extremely hard for us as millennials.
It's
And
definitely
people who
hard.
grow with technology, it's
It's
hard as shit, because we expect things
Now,
fast.
right
And
now.
if you don't know what it takes to actually build these things, which is the other aspect of ownership, is responsibility. Everybody wants to, I love that saying, everybody wants to be a boss, but nobody wants to put the work in. Most people don't even know what it means to truly own anything. And so if I don't know what it means to own it, then how am I going to know how to take care of it?
You won't.
That becomes the challenge. So we all have to learn how to do that together and with each other. And what is, and we have this thing in our neighborhood, in our like community, like what I call the CEO
Mm-hmm.
like syndrome, right? Everybody want to be a boss and everybody want to be, but you want to be a boss, but you, part of that is having a staff, learn how to take care of people and feed people.
Right.
Anything that is yours, you're going to have to figure out a way to make it y'all's and share it with people, and that's hard for people to do, because if you ain't never had nothing, how are you going to share it?
Because you just finally got it.
You finally got it. But that's the thing that we as a generation have to understand, that in us having it, it means to give it to other people as well, and to give it to your people,
right?
Because that's why you're doing it.
So for us to come together as a community, what is the first step? The first step. I don't want to know 2, 3. The first step.
First step is you got to define who your community is, right? And I think Queen and Slim taught us that. Everybody that share your skin ain't your kin.
Right.
And then start with the people that actually share your values right with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I always say this because not everybody got family like we got. Like, our family is pretty close and we all hold each other down. Everybody ain't that blessed, right? So I always define, you choose who your family is, and you choose your family because those are the people you're always coming back to and that will always have your back. Family are the people that you choose to always come back to and that will always have your back. No matter what you're going through and no matter where you go, are you coming back to those people and will they have your back? That's my definition of family. You get to choose who those people are. You don't get to choose your relatives. You don't get to choose your parents. But you do get to choose your family, and those families have to share your values. So first you have to figure out who is your family and who is your community.
I would say my first step is step up.
Oh, I like that.
I think as far as community to come together, we all have to have a collective energy and courage just to step up. In 2020 is the time now, because it's a new decade and it's going to be a new era. So why not step up now and change some of the things that we're promoting to our kids? We want things to be better, but we're not promoting the right habits. You know, for example, you know, the man's supposed to work, right? Supposed to. This is how life is. We're supposed to work. Supposed to be the breadwinner to the table. But if you're a father that's not getting up or doing something with your life, what's your kids looking at? You see what I'm saying? Or if you're just a mom and I'm just going to work and I call out early, or I'm not even, what are your kids looking at? I don't feel like we are not being good examples as black people. We're not being as strong as we can be, and we're not showing our powers as we should show. So the first thing is we need to step up, and we need to get better, and we need to actually go back to our old roots. Take a no for an answer. Let's find that yes somewhere.
Yeah, man. You know, you did a podcast about family.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, once you actually identify who your family is and you spend time with them and really get to know them, like what do they do? What do they care about? What are the visions that they got? That becomes our abilities to build new businesses, build new ideas, build new economies. And people say it's like, you know, it's hard to do business with family, but anyone that you build a business with becomes your family.
And
like truly. Like, as if I ain't talking about big business. In order for it to get to big business, it got to start somewhere. And in that starting phase, the people you in the trenches with, that's who you ride with. That's who you eat with.
And those people that leave you in the trenches should be your energy to keep going. Because I'm not going to even lie. When I started this podcast, I started here with, you know, people that wanted to start with me or wanted to be on a show. But your word wasn't nothing. Your word was shit to me because you didn't show up, or you gave me false expectations saying that you're gonna do something and do it. I think that's the second step is you need to stay tuned to our words.
Yeah,
we gotta hold our words. If we're gonna say something as black people, we really need to do it, because we will say a million things and we won't do it at all. 20 years ago, Ray said he was gonna do this. 20 years later, Ray still ain't doing this.
You know, from a spiritual element, I don't think people understand the power of word. And man. I'm growing in my relationship with word. Let me be 1,000,000 with you.
It's the tongue. The tongue is the most powerfulest thing.
And I was going through a phase of, it's like the first step is to actually claim it and you say it, right? You give voice to it, and that was my beginning of actually saying, "Yo, this is what I want to be." And this is when there is an element of development when we talk about real community development is developing people, developing ourselves, and it starts with ourselves. You have to, and it goes that patience to grow, right? My whole thing with the word and what I was saying is that it started for me as aspiration. Like I would say what I aspired, and then that allowed me to develop relationships that then allowed me to try. And it was some shit. Sometimes I was saying shit that I had no clue how I was going to do it, right? And then sometimes it would work out, and other times it wouldn't. And then I had to go through enough experiences and enough of the pain to actually be like, oh, you have to then change that from, you can't say what you want to do. You have to say what you can do. But that only changed as my stakes started getting different. You know what I'm saying? When you in real high pressure stakes, you gotta be real careful about what you say. You know what I mean? Because it could go any way at a certain point. So it's like we have to learn how to work with the word and understand like in the relationships with each other. And it's like, they may not have been ready to start this, and it may have not even been their boat. But then them knowing that you were sitting at the table with you, then they see what the podcast grows into, and that becomes a fuel for them years down the road, which comes to working with time. Everybody grows on their own rate. Not every seed grows the same. They all got different germination processes, right? If you look at the different types of seed, they all grow differently. They all need different things to grow. People are the same way. And so we got to learn how to work with it and go with it. But we all have emotions, and we got to deal with the lessons that we take the lessons. That's progress. You just, part of stepping up is just keep going. And that's the next step. It don't matter what you hit. keep going forward. Man. And that's development, like at its core.
Man, and that's funny because I said that probably like the other day. Somebody was like, "Oh, how's everything going?" I was just like, "Hey, it's not going the way I wanted, but I'm keeping going."
All right.
And that, I'm glad that you touched on that. That's what we need to, as a black community, to know to keep going, because we get so discouraged when things don't go our way. Guess what? Nothing has ever went our way.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge right now. And I think why it's timely to be having this conversation is because if you look at a whole bunch of things, it's like, where's the hope? And there's a lot of people out here hopeless. Like, what the hell do I have to hope for? I think the good thing though is that the hope is in the evidence of what we've seen is that everything is different. All the rules that used to be in terms of get a job, you stay in that job for a minute, that shit's gone. So now people is taking risks. They trying different shit that they think might work or not.
But that risk, because I'm not going to even lie to you, that even getting a job and doing this and that has changed.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like if I were to go try to apply for a job, I wouldn't even know how to get it anymore because of how the rules done changed so just often. But I also see what I see a lot more now is I see a lot more people catching on to doing what they need to do or want to do because it's more satisfying to them besides sitting behind a desk.
Right. And it's funny, it's like the commonality between getting a job right now and even building a business.
I would rather build a business right now than get a job. Because
you have to do something entrepreneurial. Own whatever your skill set is. Even if you have a job, getting a side hustle that's using the same job you're learning and doing it with entrepreneurs and people, that's what you have to do.
But
because the jobs and companies will cut you in a heartbeat.
They will, and then you also
they don't care about you.
You also got to think too with the gentrification and the prices rising everywhere you go. Like I remember me first moving to Charlotte, my rent was like probably like $950 for a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
Now you try to get a 2-bedroom 4 or 5 years later, and that's like $1,100 plus.
Yeah.
But also with these companies and working for somebody and not being able to control your own revenue, you're waiting on a raise every year. You're earning your raise, and that's like 50 or 20, 25 cents, 10 cents.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang, well, how should I keep up with
with the
gentrification, with the rise of costs?
It's impossible. It's literally, if you ain't figuring out other ways to get money, you losing money. And when somebody has your time like that, that's the good thing with like, and it's platforms like Uber and Lyft that actually are giving people a little bit more control of their time. Like when you break it down cost wise, it's not any different for real than a little bit above minimum wage. But it's the fact that you can control your time and do it at your will, and that you don't have to report to anyone. You have more dignity in terms of your work and your sense of self. That's more valuable than working for somebody when they're going to demean you and not care about you or appreciate your contribution. So it's like, even value being a little bit more than the money you get paid is about how you work.
Exactly.
Right? And now, and the thing we're saying, and the reason why I'm hopeful is that when we talked about the organizing, you got to then organize people who are your family or your community. How do you then organize and then coordinate your resources and skills to actually continue to build with each other?
And that's something you have to figure out on your own.
Well, but now we're getting help from things like I was just telling, we were talking about family reunions, right?
Yeah.
Most of your family reunion is connected, or family is connected via Facebook in some sort of way. We all got these little Facebook groups and family. All right. Facebook, for real, didn't exist 20 years ago. Bro, like, most people you sharing Netflix with, that Netflix did not exist 10 to 15 years ago. All of these platforms did not exist years ago. So what we have to do is focus on building the companies, and I'd say more importantly, the ideas, and owning the ideas
and supporting the ideas
of that next economy.
And also, let's not start with supporting and seeing it through.
Absolutely. And I'll give it like this, like right now, and I just have to say this because this is when we talked about the assets. Right, the asset of economic development as it stands right now is real estate. Right, you own real estate. Real estate is, most markets in most cities, is actually expensive. You're looking at hundreds of thousands, right? But people know if you own assets, you buy real estate. That's the way to build wealth. Well, it's actually, if you took $100,000 and let's just say you bought 4 houses or 3 houses and each are $100,000, that's $400,000. If you invested in how many company or how many ideas that people had, that could go way further with $400,000 than buying 4 houses. You know what I'm saying? So we have to change the asset from just being housing to actually then being intellectual property, which is cheaper, to being businesses, which is also cheaper than in buying a house. If we then start investing in each other, right? I invested in your brand, in your business. Now I'm an owner and I share in the growth of your podcast. That wins. Investing in your brother's business to actually help other businesses in his LLC. Right. It is not just, it's putting our money into each other, because other communities have systematic ways of doing that.
And they've been doing that for years, and that's why they're so successful.
And they have industries that they own. Like, they own those industries. You can get put on.
Family-owned businesses.
With supply chains that are all the same type of people, right? And so we have to do the same thing, but it has to be from culture. Culture is free.
And I feel like that if we do it with our culture, then we can be successful in our own way. We don't need to follow a blueprint of the white man, the Mexican man. We need to follow our own blueprint. But I don't think people have got to the point to where they know what our blueprint is. Yeah. Because we don't have one. But
and that's what I appreciate what Jay-Z did, and I think even Nip took it further, right? Like I always say, like I use Nip. There's a difference between Nip and Jay-Z, is the fact that Nip went back to his neighborhood and he actually built up his neighborhood. That was community development, actually.
But why did they have to take Nip to do it?
It's the right time, and it's also he leveraged the internet.
Right.
He leveraged the internet. He owned the asset of his music, and that then gave him the cash flow, and then he owned the brand of his clothing business, the Marathon Clothing, and it's in owning all those things that then gave him the capital, and he then was able to give jobs to people. He was in control, economic control of what happened, the jobs that he gave, the buying the building that he actually then rented the store from, or that he built his store in, and all of that came from owning the assets of his masters, right? That's the difference. And it's also an understanding place. Each place has something special. Out in LA, there's a different spirit of ownership and what does it mean to be independent. And that's just because the difference between New York and LA, hip hop wise, is that New York you had the radio stations. You actually had like neighborhood. You could get a buzz off of those things.
Off the radio.
Exactly. And they had the major labels all right there. Well, if you go out, they didn't have that. So you have to build it yourself. And those islands out there were all about, well, we going to do it ourselves. Right? And so that's where the history, and when you talk about knowing yourself and knowing your roots, that's where all of it comes into play, because it gives you ideas of how to do it and how to make it work where you are, wherever you're going to go. And yeah, man. So like, honestly, I think that's the key.
So in saying with, gentrification and all the things that we need to do and wrapping up the show, what do you want people to take away or focus on?
What do I want people to focus on? I think our generation's challenge is very clear to me that if we keep going for self and what's mine, we'll all perish. We're right now, humanity is facing extinction, like as a life form. We may not exist. And I saw it, and I mean that with climate change. Like, climate change is going to be the ultimate equalizer, right? Climate change and health. These are the two things that no matter how much money you got, if either one of these things hits you, it's over.
Especially climate for everybody.
Climate and health. Right? I mean, like you might, like, come on, man. Health is the ultimate wealth. And so like true development has to be like it's going to be an internal process. It's like making sure your mind and your body are healthy and everything you need to do in order for that to be healthy, so that then you can think of the collective. It's both of them. It's not either one. It's not me at the expense of another, and it's not me above another. It has to be me and we. And we as a generation have to figure out, how do we do this where I get everything that I need? And I mean the word need. And
not want.
Not want. We're going to have to pay that cost.
Later.
The other generations got a lot of what they wanted. And there was a lot of people left out of that. So how do we all get what we need? And then also then make sure that we're all good together.
That's what you're going to leave them with?
That's what we got to, that's the question, man. Like, and what we have to do is figure out ways of doing this in our daily lives.
What I'm going to leave people with in saying this: go for it. Go for it hard. Go for it big. Go for it with the attitude that you can do it. Even though sometimes you think you can't, I want you to go for it, because I want you to learn a lesson. And I want people to take for this year is actually like really, really come together and let's really fix some of the problems that we have as a generation. I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about as a generation, because of black people, we're so much better than what they show us or portray us to be on TV and social media. We're smart, we're powerful, and we have so many ideas that could better the world. Literally, we control the world. We're the most race that are shunned upon because they're not us. They don't have the spirit that we have. They don't have the courage that we have, and definitely don't have the brains and smart that we have. So I want people to actually come together this year and let's take over the world in a different field.
That's it, man.
So in saying that, this is King Darius with No Approval Podcast. This has been great with my cousin, picking my brain and also learning and educating y'all folks out here. And stay tuned. More show to come. And also, before I hit this little pause button, I'm sorry about that, y'all. This is actually my last audio.
Hey, let's go. Stepping on up.
2020, I'm gonna be in. You gonna see my face.
Man, hey, I put it like this, bro. I just want to say thanks for letting me do this with you, and I'm glad to see you actually doing this. So
appreciate you, man. Hey, it was fun. Let me get out of here before they be like, Darius, shut up.